Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Mercury from Atlas. Joining me here is Dyson and Mandy as well. Mandy from Atlas and Dyson, of course, from Food and Wine Industry Navigator. We're going to give it a couple minutes here just to get let people get logged in and started. Now we know it's the middle of busy summer season, so we have had a few people reach out to us and let us know that they're looking forward to the recording. Just FYI, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar, this really important piece of information for everyone, in case you guys are on the patio or working, those busy patio shifts that we currently have. Yeah, so we'll just give it a couple minutes and then we'll get started. So yeah, we'll go till 2:04 and then we'll start with a couple of intros as well.
Sounds good. Can we see how many people have joined?
I think we're getting some are rolling in right now. Here we are. Excellent, excellent. There we are. There we go. Perfect. All right, we'll slowly start here with the introductions, and I'll hand it off to Dyson for the intro from him, and then I'll introduce myself, and Mandy can do her own introduction as well.
All right. My name is Dyson Forbes. I am one of the admins with the Food and Wine Industry Navigator Facebook group that's been going on well over a decade now, originally started by Ivy Knight. The group has been a fantastic way of getting information out to people. So I'm hoping that in keeping on with that tradition, that this webinar will continue to be an informative thing for the people joining in. A few years ago, I called out a company in our little group for being a scam. A domino effect, and several years later, the government had to make changes to the law as a result of the efforts between myself and many of the members in the Food and Wine Career Navigator, contacting the CRA, contacting the Employment Board, contacting their local MPPs and MPs. And all of this has resulted in the government having to change the laws. And so today we are going to go over some of the changes that pertain specifically to people who are currently employed in the industry and receiving tips. Last year, the Food and Wine Career Navigator partnered with Atlas and in hopes that we could bring some transparency and some industry-focused solutions to the ongoing issue regarding tip distribution. And this is so far been pretty good. Atlas has been going on for about 6 months now with a number of people signing up for it. And the government has listened to us, and the laws that they have come out with tend to be based on transparency, clarity, and fairly employee focused, which is strange, but also great news. This is specifically going to be focusing on issues around the tip distribution and what people need to know in regards to how their tips are being distributed to them, what the difference between direct and controlled tips are, and what their rights and responsibilities are, as well as the rights and responsibilities of their employers. If you do have any questions, please do use the Q&A box that is available in this webinar. Don't just ask them in the chat, and we will take a look at the questions as they roll in. Again, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared with people in the Food and Wine Career Navigator after the webinar is over. Terry.
Awesome. No, well said, well said. And we at Atlas are extremely excited to be working together with the Food and Wine Industry Navigator. As somebody who's been in the industry for 30 years now, it's definitely a resource that I went to a lot, whether I was looking for people or, whether early on in my career posting for jobs. I think it's been a really integral and really critical piece, community to go to ask questions and find out answers about really critical topics such as tipping. Tipping's been sensitive since day one, since the day it was born many years ago, and we're really excited to be working together with the Food and Wine Industry Navigator to help bring, first and foremost, just awareness. Talking to a lot of friends of mine in the industry and just clients as well, and prospective clients. It's really incredible, one, how much has been learned over the last year and a half since this whole controlled versus direct thing really kind of blew up, but also two, how much opportunity we still really have to get out there and spread the word. Because as you'll see in this, as we'll share, not only is the Bill 149 update a really good update in terms of, to what Dyson was speaking about, which is, it's kind of really good for the employees. Obviously, what's good for the employees is also great for the employer. And I see those two worlds really as a partnership. Great restaurants, employers, employees are working together always. And in the same way here, it's time for the employees to have that transparency, to understand how much tips they're making, to know what their rights are when it comes to tips, just as much as it comes to anything else in the restaurant. So we're extremely excited to be working together to spread the word to employees and employers alike about what the rules are, what the new rules are, what the adjustments that, thanks to groups like the Food and Wine Industry Navigator, and their steadfast communications about the frustrations on the hands of the employees, that the government has listened and they've made changes that have been really positive for the employees, and we want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. Now, with that being said, I'm one of the co-founders here at Atlas. As I mentioned, I come from the industry side of things. Basically grew up in restaurants. My family had restaurants, so honestly, I've been in it all my life, and I'm really excited to be part of a company in Atlas that is really working hard to do changes for the industry that are positive for both the employee and the employer, and hopefully raise profitability across the board for restaurants so that we can have more and better restaurants across the city and across the country and across the globe. And now I'll introduce Mandy, who can take care of our own introductions. She's from Team Atlas as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mandy. I am an account manager over here at Atlas. I come with a good 15 years of hospitality experience under my belt. Many of those years were working as with Turi as my general manager. And yeah, just to echo what Turi said, I'm just very happy to be able to work alongside industry-focused communities like Food and Wine Industry Navigator, and to really be working for a company that is sort of true to its motto, which is reimagining hospitality together. So I will pass it back over to our amazing hosts.
Amazing. Okay, well, let's dive in. So as you see here tonight, today's focus really is on Bill 149, and I'll get into what that is and when that happened and all that. And then, as Dyson mentioned, please do drop questions in the Q&A. Just as a note, we've had some people share some questions that let us know they weren't going to be here. So we'll be addressing some of those at the end of the seminar. Again, if you have questions all throughout, or when you're watching this on the recording level, please know that you can reach out to Dyson on Food and Wine Industry Navigator, us at atlasrms.com, with any of those questions. As you could see, raising awareness about what your rights are is really at the top of our list. So diving in, Bill 149. Now, I do want to specify this is an Ontario bill, and it's really important that we bring awareness about this. So let's just dive in. So Bill 149, an update on Ontario tipping laws. And here you will see myself and Dyson. So the agenda for today is going to be very simple. We're going to review what is this Bill 149, a really straightforward, simple explanation of the new law and the two main changes. We're going to talk about tipping laws in general. These are very important for employees to know. It's been incredible to just spread that awareness and have people understand things that they didn't realize, they were running into risk-heavy scenarios, that they're working in risk-heavy scenarios. So it's really good for us to go over that. Obviously, why should you care? We're all busy. I've been a server for 15, 20 years. I was a bartender. I get it. We're super busy. We're running around just trying to make sure that we're putting out all the fires and making all the customers happy. But at the end of the day, this is a really important issue that you should care about. And we'll go over the impact of what a control tip is, environment, which is the environment we're unfortunately seeing the most of. What that impact is on employees and employers. A checklist for you just to kind of look around and say, as an employee and an employer, hey, am I in a direct tip environment or am I in a controlled environment? The answers to that is very, very important, and we'll go over why. And finally, we'll just go over some questions, again, some potentially live questions, and as well as some of the questions that people have submitted in advance. Excellent. So let's just dive in. So Bill 149. So Bill 149 was introduced this year in June in terms of updating the Employment Standards Act. And what two key changes for tipping. There's actually a lot of changes. If you look up Bill 149, you Google it, you'll see a lot of changes pertaining to our industry. Specifically today, we're only going to talk about the two main changes that are relevant to tipping. One of the biggest changes that really, as Dyson spoke to earlier, came about from a heavy reaction to another company. And that is the approved methods of payment. So now we have a clear idea of exactly what the methods of payments are and what is an approved methods of payment. So in this case, the way it's written is this: the employers must distribute tips using approved methods such as cash, check, direct deposit, electronic transfer to an employee designated account. Notably, tips can no longer be placed on credit or debit cards. And I will repeat that one more time. Tips cannot be placed on credit or debit charge cards. Those are no longer approved methods of payments, according to Bill 149. Again, please feel free to reach out to the Ministry of Labor and confirm this on your own. It's a worthy use of time in case you are in one of those environments. We'll talk a little bit more about what to do if you are in one of those environments. But again, I cannot stress enough, this is a huge victory for the employees who in the past really didn't have a choice. And you'll see a lot of this seminar talks about how we're moving from a world where the employees felt like they didn't have a choice to a world where we do have a choice. And I'll talk about some of those rights very shortly here as well. The second thing, if you're in a tip pooled environment and owners and directors and shareholders, one, are allowed to share in that tip pool if they perform similar tasks to the tipped employees. And now, there's great examples of this, whether it's a small spot where the owner's a chef. Of course, it makes sense if that chef is on the floor, working in the kitchen 8 hours a day, most likely 10, for them to participate in the tip pool. So that's okay. The big update here is they now must post that, and then now must also post the tip model. So if you're an employer, for example, who is that chef, who's working that classic 60-seater in Toronto, you now have to post that tip model and let the employees know that you're participating, and let the employees know kind of how you're participating as well. So again, there's a lot of detail and questions that I'm sure will come from that. So by all means, please reach out to us with your specific questions about this, but definitely a really incredible update. Again, dating myself a bit, from 20 years ago where you were just giving tip out just blank and having no idea where that went and how it was distributed, and the infamous house tip out of 15 years ago of 3%, where we really never knew where that went and weren't really allowed to ask. So the great news is that's all changed, and you can kind of see this move towards transparency for the employee, and it's just the right thing to do. So it's really great to see that Bill 149 has made those two key changes. Again, the approved methods of payment, and ensuring that if owners and directors and shareholders are involved in the tip pool, they are allowed to do so only if they're performing the same task as the tipped employees, that they now share that with the employees. And in addition to that, they need to keep records of this for 3 years. And this is where it's really important to have a great digital tip tracking system, which we'll get into later. So that's Bill 149 right there. And again, went live June 21st of this year. And we've already seen a fair amount of positive impact from that. Now, it's really important, and this is where things can get a little bit confusing. So just on a high level, wanted to go over this. Bill 149 is a provincial law that came from the Ministry of Labor. And so, it's impacting the Ontario locations and Ontario businesses. However, federal laws still play into that. So the CRA law about direct and controlled still plays into this. And so you got to really look at the two working together almost, and they overlap, and they often, it's easy to get confused about which one does what, but really, you almost have to adhere to all of them and make sure that you're checking off the boxes on both of them. Obviously, there's differences in various, ministries of labor depending on the provinces, but in this case, we're referencing the Ontario one. And here you can clearly see, Ministry of Labor, They're the ones that did Bill 149, amazing update to the Employment Standards Act. But we'll talk about now is the federal laws and the CRA, that scary word CRA, those laws, and what they could mean for you as employees and employers. But just understand that those two work really in a synergetic kind of way. So, all right, so the $1 million question. I'm really busy, Turi. I got lots to do. I got tables to serve. I got all sorts of things to do this summer. Why should I care? Well, here's the big thing. And unfortunately, we've seen examples of this across the board with some of our earliest clients who jumped on board. Some of the people that we talk to all the time are people that have just finished being audited. And what I mean by that is there are two types of tips. There's a control tip and a direct tip. And I'll get into what defines each one of those, but just understand this. The control tip is the one that is subject to CPP and EI, meaning that in an audit, if they find the environment to be controlled, the CRA wants the CPP and EI on all tips earned up to 3 years back. And that is a devastating amount for both the business, and that is a devastating amount for the employees. And we have absolute stories of employees that have gotten audited and they found that they owed CPP and EI for 3 years back. And some of these CPP and EI fines from the CRA for these individual employees, and these weren't even big locations, were $12,000, $13,000, $15,000, and $17,000 for these 4 employees. So it's a significant risk of you being in a controlled environment and not knowing it. And really, the way it breaks down is this: CPP and EI together right now in 2024 is 7.6%. So here, for example, we can see an example where a customer leaves a $100 tip. Well, if they find that you're controlled, then the employer needs to contribute 7.65%, and so does the employee. Now, for those of you who get tips on payroll, this is going to be a very familiar story, and we'll talk about that in a second about why that's not necessary, moving forward, since there is a way to create a direct tip system where neither the employer or the employee has to pay. But be aware that if a customer leaves a $100 tip, again, 7.6% CPP and EI is contributed by the employer and 7.6% by the employee. So in an audit, what ends up happening for the employers, we have seen cases also where the CRA wants the employer to pay both halves. They don't want to go around chasing the employees anymore. There's been too much changeover, et cetera, et cetera. So then they ask, for the employer to pay the 15.22%. And this is absolutely deadly, especially right now in the environment that we're in. Nobody can afford to pay 15.22% of the tips generated by their business for the last 3 years running. It's, I'll talk about the Ristorante Mono case, but just it's a lot of money in these fines. And so really being aware of what you are, whether it's controlled or direct, and ensuring that that is a thing that you're doing on purpose is really critical. And again, here's a really quick example of what I'm talking about to give you guys some real numbers. Let's say you're a server, you make $500 a week, you're making about $2,150 a month. The CPP and EI on each month is $164. So even at $500 a week, you're looking at $2,000 per year or a $6,000 fine. Now, for those servers out there, bartenders and owners, $500 is a crazy amount. So imagine a higher end place where we're talking $1,200. You're talking $1,500. So now you're talking $18,000 is the potential fine to an employee, and the employee never knows. They didn't know that they were in a controlled environment, so they get hit with this fine, and it's really shocking. And that's the huge reason why we're raising awareness about this, and also letting people know that there is a solution to being a controlled tip environment. But the first step really is to be aware of it. So
I'd like to point out.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to point out quickly that with this, there is no way of hiding these tips from the CRA, in that if they want to look back, they're not going to look at your bank accounts. They're not going to look over your pay stubs. They're going to look at the POS system from your employer. They're going to look at the actual money and where it traveled. So without having the specific tip models in place, formed so that they're functioning properly, there is always the risk that people get looked at 3 years down the line and don't realize that they were in these tip models. They think they're safe because they didn't record anything. They didn't know there were any recordings. It was all recorded.
Yeah, no, so that's an excellent point. And something I'll touch on a little bit more later on, but like we were actually lucky enough to speak to a CRA agent, former CRA agent that is, and one of the revelations was exactly how they go in and find this information. Because I was part of that group 10 years ago, you know, that when discussing cash, it was like, well, how do they, you know, this is impossible for people to find cash, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you know, to Dyson's point, it's 100% very easy, especially now that 90% of transactions are electronic. It is dead easy to find tips. So if you are in a controlled environment and you don't know it, and in 3 years later, they, you know, they do an audit on that business and they decide that they want to find those employees, you're going to get fined for 3 years worth of tips and they're going to be able to find it. So excellent point, Dyson. Thank you very much. All right. So we've talked about this control tip environment, and you know, and control tips are scary because at the end of the day, if you get audited and you're in a control tip environment and you're not contributing to CPP and EI, the CRA basically sees you as owing that CPP and EI. It's the same as you're not paying it on, you know, your payroll. The exact same logic when it comes to their mind. They're like, hey, you haven't paid the CPP and EI. We'd like that, please. And so what's the answer to all of this? Well, I talked about two models. I talked about control tips and I talked about direct tips. Well, control tips, as they imply, are controlled by the business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, therefore they are seen as paid by the employer to the employee. And this is why the CRA wants that money, because they're saying, hey, this is not a tip. It is not going directly from the guest to the employee. It's hitting the business. It's staying in the business for a bit. There's a bunch of things that the business is manipulating about the tips and or controlling. And therefore, we're seeing this as money paid to the employees. Well, how do we avoid this? How do we, if you're in a controlled model that's either, you know, you're unaware of it, or you're in a controlled model that's unnecessarily paying, you know, CPP and EI on payroll, how do we move away from this? Well, the way we move away from it is to create what's called a direct tip system. And honestly, the best analogy for a direct tip system is, again, I'm going to date myself, but going back 20 years ago when everything was cash, let's say Dyson and I, we worked the bar at this pub on a Monday to Friday. We always worked the Monday to Friday lunch shift. Well, Dyson and I get together and we go, hey, Dyson, how do you want to break this up? We decide the easiest thing to do is split it down the middle every day because it all comes out in the wash anyway. There's a giant tip jar behind us. Guests come in, they have a great time, they leave us money, they leave us cash, we put it in the tip jar. At the end of the shift, we grab that tip jar and we tip it over. We split the money in half, we put it in our pockets, and we go home at the end of the shift. There's no, you know, owners involved. The business had nothing to do with it. In fact, to give you some insight, the business didn't want anything to do with it because it was one more headache that they just didn't want to deal with, which is fair because it was our money at the time, right? So fast forward 20 years later, well, everything's electronic and now things are going through business accounts, and that's where the trouble came. So how do we create that tip jar with cash now in a digital world? Well, here's how you do it. So there are some key check marks. And this is also for those of you out there right now going, am I in a controlled environment? Am I right now at risk of, you know, a fine of 3 years worth of CPP and EI on my tips, 7.61% of what I make? Well, let's take a look at it. Some of the key things that you need to look for are the following. So I'm going to tell you what defines a controlled tip model. One of the dead giveaways right off the bat is who created the tip division model, right? I'll go back to me 20 years ago. It was very clear who made the tip model. That tip model came from the business. You didn't have a say in it. You had no choice in how it was going to be. This is how it is. This is the tip model that happens in restaurant X. It's just how it is. So if the tip model came from the employer and the business itself, and you were given that, there's a good chance you're controlled. If the staff tip committee, if the employees don't in some way have possession of tips by the end of the shift, and let's say it stays in an account or it stays in a business safe for a long time past, you know, the end of the night, or most places, you know, the entire week, and then you're giving it to it the next week, you're most likely in a controlled environment. If it's the business that's processing the tip payments and giving that to the employees, and they're the ones doing all the calculation and figuring out who gets what, and, you know, they're the ones filling out the spreadsheet, et cetera. And then at the end of the week, you know, you get your little bundle of cash or you get your whatever, most likely in a controlled environment. And then, you know, is there paperwork that you can access as an employee? Well, if it's a payroll stub, you know, if your tips are on payroll, you're 100% controlled system. If there's no evidence or proof of it, again, going back to who created the division model, again, you're controlled. So these are all really, really great indicators. Another great indicator is mandatory gratuity, which is a little bit more complex since you can have events and they're separated. So, but if you have, like, you know, simple auto grad on a party of 6, on a party of 8, there is no way of taking a mandatory gratuity and turning it into a direct tip because it's a decision that the business made to have that. So, and the good news is there, because I know that's a scary thing when I say that out loud for a lot of servers, is that we're seeing great traction with people, making it not a mandatory tip, which means that at the end of the day, they're going to recoup more money on a tip level than they would if they were to get fined on a gratuity. So yeah, so these are some of the key things you're looking for. So who made the tip division model? How long are these tips in position for by the employer? Who's doing the tip division and the tip processing? What kind of paperwork do we have? And so on the opposite side of that, what makes a direct tip system? The exact opposite, right? There are no autogrants. There's no mandatory gratuity put in place by the business. None of that. The employees form a tip committee, and they're the ones that actually decide on the division model, right? Again, to make, we go back to my analogy with Dyson. Dyson and I got together and we chatted about how tips are going to be on the bar, that, because we work Monday to Friday. That's the employees controlling it. Possession of tips at the end of the shift. So this is really critical. And this is one of the most, black and white elements of being controlled or direct. The CRA very clearly on their website states that the tips must be in the possession of the tip committee or the employees by the end of the shift. And of course, there's technology, thankfully, out there now that can definitely help you with that challenge. Also, the people doing the calculation and the distribution of the tips, again, in my analogy with Dyson, it was us that tipped the jar over. It was us that, split it up and counted it, and it was us that put it in our pockets. And then obviously paperwork proving that it is the employees is also a great indicator of you being a direct tip system. So you can see that being a direct tip system, it can be challenging. But again, no matter what the amount of work is that would be needed to create a direct tip system in your environment, you could see how much it would be worth in the sense of for both the business and the employees. And this is where that partnership really comes into play, because you think about it, if the business gets hit with one of these, as I call them, business ending fines, well, you're gonna have nowhere to work. And if the employees get hit with one of these fines, it's really, really brutal for somebody who's, a part-time employee to get hit with a $9,000, $10,000, $12,000 fine. And this is not a negotiable fine. You can't fight this thing. It's like, it's CPP and EI. These are state taxes. They don't have any room for negotiation. So once you get the fine, you have to pay that. So anyway, high level, here's what you need to do controlled and direct. And again, a lot of this stuff is available on our website. And please reach out to us if you have any questions about your specific location. We know every single restaurant is its own galaxy, and there's a million factors and variables that can influence these types of things. But at the end of the day, high level, very simply put, these are the things you're looking for to ask yourself the question: am I in a controlled tip environment? And that question is the same as, am I right now liable for CPP and EI on all of my tips that I've earned for the last 3 years? It's an immense amount of money. So please ask that question. Now, I'll talk briefly about Atlas.
I'd like to make one note on that previous page that when you're working with an employee-based tip committee, the possession of the tips needs to be in the committee's hands. They don't have to be off premises by the end of the day. Whereas with a controlled tip, it's possession of the tips at the end of the shift. With the direct tips, it's the team of employees or the tip as you mentioned, they have to be in control of the tips, but they don't have to be off-site.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, Dyson. And I'll touch on that a bit further. Just it has to be out of the hands of the business and into the hands of the employees. So the possession has to move away from the business, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a restaurant that I'll allude to later. They were, giving tips out the next day. The next day at like 11 a.m., they were giving tips out. Well, the CRA said, no, that's still not good enough, because you're still holding it in your business account long enough. You're holding it overnight. You're holding it off in the morning. You could go buy things with that money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. By the time you give it back to the employees, you're paying the employees. So it is absolutely critical that, the possession of the total tips of that shift is moved from the from the business to the employees. And there's a variety of formats that can happen in, whether it's, depositing in a safe or it's in a digital safe as well, like Atlas does. But we have to be able to also prove this. This is the other thing that we run into a lot on a lot of our exploration calls, is people are like, oh, well, I'm pretty much direct. I'm almost direct here. I could feel like I'm almost there. And then it's like, at the end of the day, if you get audited, and one of the things that was, again, another revelation from the CRA auditor that we spoke to was the fact that they need proof. it's not good enough to say, hey, I do move the money. Well, show us you move the money. Prove to us you're moving the money. Well, the employees are in control. Well, prove to us the employees are in control. This burden of proof lies on the employer. And so a lot of times what happens is people who, are doing what 80% of the stuff out there, they're just not having the proof, and they don't have the infrastructure necessary to be a fully direct model. And it's challenging. And which is why, ourselves as a company really wanted to dive in and provide the help needed for you to become a direct tip system fairly easily without having to make a lot of changes at all. And that way you have one less thing to worry about, and your employees and, employers out there, for example, like, this is something you would do for your employees. And we're getting employees who are thanking their employers for adding this element, in this case, Atlas, to their businesses, because you're actually keeping your employees and your own business safe. It's really a win-win in this situation. But no, excellent pointing that out for us, Dyson. So really quickly, don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but Atlas does this, and we really set out to do this as seamlessly and easily as possible. We're really, really excited about where we're going with this as well, because, not to give away too much information, but the world of tips will only become easier in the future. We integrate with point of sales. We integrate with your scheduling system. We can handle any tip model that a spreadsheet can handle. So you can really see how very quickly some of our integrated clients, it's a very fast system in terms of being able to understand who worked, when they worked, how many hours they worked. We already have your tip model. We save your employees in there. The beauty too is employees, for you guys out there and folks out there who have been receiving cash tips. As somebody who used to divide cash tips, I'll tell you I don't know if you guys know this, but no one's getting 100% of their tips because we don't do nickels and dimes. So, it's 230, 142 becomes 230, 233, 43 becomes 235, depending on the denominations that we can find at these banks. With Atlas Direct Tips, you're getting 100% of your tips, the exact amount. You're getting the 233, 41. It is directly deposited into your bank account. You're going to get transparent tip reports. Again, you see this move towards transparency that we're really trying to, be a big part of with Food and Wine Industry Navigator as well. And tip division models that are managed by employees. It's going right back to that tip jar. It's really that on a digital, elevated level. And the businesses, it's just you're safe. You got a compliance solution. It really takes it out of your hands and puts it back in the hands of employees. Now, obviously, as a business, you need to be able to oversee what's going on as it's money moving out of your business account. But, you're avoiding the bank runs, you're avoiding that cash, you're avoiding God, it gives me PTSD to remember the piles of cash in front of me, the thousands of little envelopes, the spreadsheet, and putting names on envelopes, and still such an imperfect system, because not only you're not getting 100% of your tips, but really at the end of the day, you're not really getting a report on what happened. You're just getting this envelope with, a questionable amount of money in it. And how do you know how that got calculated? Whereas the future really is full transparency. Here's what your tips were 3 months ago on a Monday. Here's what your tips were 2 weeks ago. You should know what the money, in the same way that you're getting from payroll, you should have the exact same, data for yourself when it comes to tips. We've been seeing really, really positive impact and great feedback from employees and great engagement from employees on wanting to understand, hey, where is my money coming from? How is my money being divided? All of that information, really, really important. And that's what we're currently doing. So obviously, if you are in a controlled environment, please reach out to us. We can help on multiple levels, whether you're doing it on purpose and putting it through payroll. There's no time like now, really, given the industry and the state of the industry, to find ways to save money, which is really kind of, our mission. And so by saving you that CPP and EI, both on the business side and on the employee side, that's just freeing up just a little bit more money for yourselves as a business. Obviously on the employee side, in that situation, you're not paying CPP and EI in your tips. And then, ultimately at that point, it's no longer in a T4. So giving you the choice of what you want to do with it. For those of you that are in a controlled environment and are unaware of it, and now all of a sudden you've got a solution, you're aware now what the danger is. You're walking around, and we see these restaurants day in and day out when we go out. And it's really heartbreaking. And we try and have conversations with them about, hey, you guys are in a controlled environment. This is a really dangerous place to be in, because this just takes one auditor to walk in and just ask a couple of questions. Most controlled environments, it's a really quick discovery. One of the classic examples was one of our earliest clients who did get audited, unfortunately, and lost. It was a simple phone call. It was, how do you do your tips? Oh, we give them out once a week. where does that tip sit while you're waiting to give it out? It sits in our business bank account. Cool, we'll call you 2 weeks later. They got audited, employees got fined, business got fined. So it's really that straightforward. Yeah, so at the end of the day, the one other thing I wanted to touch on too was, you know, this law is really, really important for us, you know, for as a hospitality industry, for the hospitality industry, for the servers, and for the businesses. And please, if you have any questions, by all means, I know I'm seeing some action in the Q&A, so we'll address those in a second. But we're really excited to get out there and raise awareness about this very serious liability that businesses are walking around with, and employees are walking around with without even knowing. So I'll finish with that. Dyson, any words to add at the end there? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
I think you did a great job of covering almost everything there. Really just trying to illustrate the point that people need to be aware if they're in a direct tip environment or if they're in a controlled tip environment, and that employees are now tasked with taking on the responsibility of taking care of this themselves, and that, you know, overall it's less expensive for restaurants or establishments that rely on tip models to allow the employees to control their own tips, and for them to allow these tip committees to proceed with the tip distribution, because once it's in their hands, then it's outside of the establishment's purview.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. Well said. Okay, so I think we've got a few questions in the Q&A. I think I'll go through those, and I think we may have other questions that, like I said, we got sent to us. So I think Mandy's going to rip through those. I think she's received those. So I'll go through these. When do these laws come into effect? Question number one, June 21st of this year of 2024. So the laws are already in effect. Those laws I went over, those two big changes to tipping, and that is in effect as of right now. So again, you know, if you're an employer and you're participating, you know, in the right way because you're doing the similar or same work as the employee and you're participating in the tip pool, you just know now that you need to post about that and post how that's being done, post the tip model. Again, we're moving to a world of transparency. It's you know, it's going to become an employee retention thing, to be honest. But you know, putting out there exactly how you're doing it, and don't forget you have to have records of that. And if it changes over the next 3 years as well. So the laws again come into effect, have already come into effect on June 21st. Second question is, we get our tips on payroll. Do these laws apply to us? Yes, 100%. So if you're in a controlled and direct and tipped environment, that's one thing. As I said, as you saw, kind of like that falls almost into the federal CRA area. This is Ministry of Labor, and as, again, to be clear, this is for Ontario with Bill 149. So regardless of whether you're controlled or direct or whatever, these laws apply to everyone. This is a Ministry of Labor ESA law, so at the end of the day, 100% they apply to you. What's the benefit to the employee? I mean, I think that's what's the benefit of the employee of Atlas or of being in a direct tip model, and both are the same thing. So it's just really knowing that you're safe, knowing that you're not liable for 7.61% of your tips. That's high level, the legal element of it. The second part of it is transparency and control over your money. You know, it's been your money always, but somehow it went from the tip jar where it really was your money and you counted it and you had full control of it, to all of a sudden you just got, you know, envelopes of cash or these random transfers, or, you know, on a card, which is obviously now not legal anymore, but no control of really what it was. And so the benefits to the employees are both transparency, and of course, being safe from CPP and EI. And if you're an employee who's currently getting their tips on payroll, the benefits are massive, because you're now not going to have to pay CPP and EI on it, but also now your tips, you know, it will be your choice what you would like to do at tax time, as those tips will no longer be on your T4. Okay, sorry, we just had another question.
I'd like to point out one other thing, that one of the benefits of working with Atlas is that you are not working with prepaid credit card companies that are subject to different rules and regulations than the typical banking industry, which means, and this has been an issue for several people in the group, have mentioned that money has gone missing, money has disappeared from their accounts. There is very little accountability as to how to track this down, where it went, and what's going on. Because Atlas works with e-transfers as opposed to prepaid credit cards, there is full transparency for the employee and no third-party bank or, convenience machines acting as banks trying to, act as a mediary or sort of interloper with your money. Your money is yours. It doesn't belong to some tech fins down on Bay Street.
Excellent, excellent. And you know what? One thing I do want to point out that was also added in Bill 149, which we alluded to in the wording that we had, but one of the things that really struck us right off the bat was the employee must choose the account that their money is deposited if the tip distribution is chosen to be a direct tip or an electronic method. So again, that makes, I don't know a lot of employees that want their tips on some sort of third-party credit card. So at the end of the day, it's the employee's choice to say, hey, listen, if this is going on in my business, and here's a great, segue into this. Like, what do I do? So here I am, either I'm in a controlled environment or here I am in this environment. I'm getting my tips on these cards. It's not what I want. I would like to, let somebody know. And all you simply have to do is just talk to some of your managers, or if you're a business owner, you can reach out to us for advice on what to do. And if you want to confirm any of this stuff, just because, obviously you've just met me on the screen. So if you want to confirm any of this stuff, please, by all means, call the Ministry of Labor. They will walk you through some of the new laws. They can answer the question of, is what you're currently doing correct? Is it, abiding by the new laws? And, from what our clients are telling us, it's very clear that, this money going on the credit card and the employee not having a choice is definitely against the new laws, which are, as I said, are live. So it's really, really important to be aware of that. And obviously, if you're in a controlled tip environment, I think one of the first things you do is, talk to one of your managers and ask them questions. If you're a business owner, again, reach out to Atlas, reach out to Dyson and say, hey, listen, can we get some more information? Can we book a call to just maybe chat about, our situation and what, if we can help and et cetera. So there's a lot of things and a lot more resources coming out to help out from people like ourselves and people like Food and Wine Industry Navigator. And it's just really important. Number one, you first have to be aware of your situation. Number two, you have to be aware of what your rights are, which is what this webinar is all for. And number three, you need to know what you need to do, which is, if you're an employee, reach out to one of your managers. And feel free as an employee also to reach out to us, if you have questions, you don't want to go to your manager and you want to ask us some questions about here's my situation anonymously, what do you think? Feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy. We're really here to help this out. This is a serious problem and a serious liability for everyone involved in the industry. And the last thing we need is the industry losing more money than it's already doing currently. So that's my piece on that. And I think there was one last question there, which is, if I receive my tips in my bank account, can the CRA find it? So we alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I do want to touch on this because this is a question that often gets asked. And honestly, probably like 15 years ago, I would have answered it differently in terms of being an employee back then and being like, oh, there's no way. So Dyson already pointed it out, and the CRA agent again told us, we're not going into individuals' bank accounts. Like, that's not happening. We're not going to go into an environment with 90 employees and then research every single one of their accounts to see if we can find it. The information's already in the POS. And if you don't believe me, remember last night when you closed and you had a read and it said your name on that read and it said your tips at the bottom. That is digital information that's inside of the POS. So regardless of whether your tips are distributed in cash, distributed in check, distributed through Atlas by e-transfer or by Canadian Tire Money or by whatever method that's going out, it doesn't matter how the tips are going out because the CRA will find it at the source. The source is the POS. So fully transparently, here's how it works. They're going to go in and they're going to say, okay, well, we want to know how much Mandy made. And here's the real problem with not tracking tips versus having a system that tracks your tips. So let's say they happen to audit Mandy, during the summer. It's patio season. It's crazy. It's busy. Mandy's, making $1,500 a week in tips, but it's peak season. So Mandy doesn't do this all year long. So they go in and they audit it. Mandy says, I don't have any records of anything. I can't show you what I got. So they'll go into the POS. They'll see Mandy selling. They'll look at Mandy's sales for the last 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. And they'll see Mandy selling X, Y, Z, and they'll see her making, $1,500 a week. And then they'll go, well, unless you can prove otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and assume that you make $1,500 a week all year long. And that's the amount that we're going to actually fine you on, not on, we're not going to pull the records for the entire year for all 90 employees. We're just going to do this basis of assumptions. So it's really important, one, to understand that if you receive tips in your bank account, it is absolutely zero difference than you receiving them in cash or check. It doesn't matter. The CRA can find it regardless, especially considering now that 95% of transactions are electronic. The CRA can find the money, no problem, regardless of how it's done. Now, that segues beautifully into, if you receive your tips in your bank account, does it change anything to do with what you do at the time of taxes? No, it is still 100% your choice, and our stance still remains that you should file all of your tips for taxes. But at the end of the day, it's still your choice. So nothing changes because it's going direct into your bank account. Now, the positive changes are you don't got to go to work on your day off to pick up your envelope. When you're on vacation, now your money will arrive regardless of whether you're there or not. There's a ton of positives as we spoke about there, but 100%, there is zero difference between you receiving it in your bank account. Not anymore. Again, 20, 30 years ago, the answer would have been different for sure, but not now that 95% of transactions are electronic. Sorry, that was a bit of a long one. I think, Mandy, do you have any questions for me from some of the other people that weren't going to make it today?
I think you've actually gone over a lot of them, but there is one question that just popped up. My employer currently distributes tips on credit card. Is that allowed? And what can I do if I don't want to use the card? So I think you've touched a bit on this, but definitely what do you do if you don't want that?
Yeah. And so there's that situation again. And this is what's beautiful about now versus 5 years ago, 6 years ago. 6 years ago, I don't know. I don't know what the answer would have been. But right now, so my employer currently distributes tips on a credit card. That is in Ontario, 100% legal. Please call the Ministry of Labor to confirm that for yourself. No, it's not allowed. As you saw, the methods of payments that have been clearly outlined, in that update with Bill 149, clearly list, cash, check, direct deposit, and that's it. There's no mention of a credit card. And so, yeah, the answer is very straightforward, to be honest.
I would like to point out that for people stuck in this situation where you are currently using the service that sort of started this all, the Atlas does have ways of convincing employers to move over to them. There are some referrals. There are other things that can be done to educate your employers. Keep in mind that this is the hospitality industry. Some people are going to be slower to change than others. Some people might need to have their handheld in the process of adopting a new system, particularly after they've already just recently bought in and adopted a system that they're now being told is bunk. So it's not a time to go into your work with your guns drawn, ready to get into a fight with your manager or anything like that. I don't advise, fighting anybody about this, but just trying to be as informative as possible and to let them know that there are other options that are legal and that would allow the system to distribute the money into the account of your choosing. And this is the key wording that is so important with the change, is the account of the employee's choosing. A fintech company down on Bay Street holding on to your money for 2 weeks while they get ready to do their transfer once every 2 weeks is not the account of your choosing, unless that is legitimately what you as an employee want. But if you and several other employees in the company together are like, this doesn't work for me, having a system like Atlas is more flexible and easier for employers to be able to make special circumstances for their staff than being sold and bought into a system that, technically shouldn't exist right now.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to point out, one quick correction there. It's actually because we had a client reach out to us, and it's fundamentally at this point in time to have the tips deposited on the card is at the point of a not legal, where even if the employees decide for some reason to do so, they're still not allowed to do so. They still can't receive the tips on the credit card. So that's the only correction there. which is, yeah, I mean, that makes sense if you look at the whole, the law, but, and again, to kind of echo what Dyson's saying, what do you do? Like, it's not this like rah, 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 you know, you just have a conversation about it, but just know that right now you have rights as an employee to go ahead and say, hey, listen, I just, you know, saw this webinar, I've been seeing information out there. Can we have a discussion about, you know, talk to some of your other employees and get together with some of your other employees and sit down with your managers and say, hey, can we just chat about this? You know, I don't want us and I don't want the business that I work for to be at risk. It's more of like awareness for everyone involved, because as you can see, like, it's not just the employees who win, it's actually the business as well. So making sure that everyone's doing things that are compliant, you know, is really, really important. So the thing to do is to start the conversation in your business and, you know, where you work. If you're the employer, obviously reach out to us, or, you know, we can obviously refer you to some of our clients who can help you as well. But start the conversation in the building and say, hey, listen, I think we're in a control tip environment, and I don't want me to be at risk, and I don't want my fellow colleagues to be at risk, and I certainly don't want the business to be at risk, because I've been working here for 5 years. But let's have a conversation. Let's see what we can do. And please, at that point in time, if you need any resources, please reach out to us or Dyson. We'd be happy to help you out in that sense. And really, as you can see, that's really the whole purpose of this right now, is to raise that awareness. And you know, we spent a ton of time and effort to build a solution that fits, that's, you know, employer friendly, and that, you know, we're getting, you know, tons and tons of people using it, and it's really, really streamlining. But, you know, as much as the streamlining and the automation is really important, it is, because the time saving is money, but keeping everyone safe from the liability, especially at a time like right now, where one of these fines, you know, 8 out of 10 times, this will end the business. If businesses right now don't have enough money as it is, if you get a, God forbid, $500,000 fine, that'll end the business right there. So it's a real thing. It's not, you know, it's not happening once every 3 or 4 years. It's happening a fair amount out there. So I think rolling the dice would be a very, very unwise thing at this point in time, especially when there are solutions out there that can help. So have that conversation. If you're listening to this right now, go into work, talk to your employees, talk to your, you know, talk to your server buddies, your bar buddies, and just say, hey man, have you heard of this? And if you guys have heard of this, come together and think, okay, let's look around and see, is this a controlled environment? I think it is, guys. I think it is. Let's have a chat with our manager. Hey, do you mind sitting down with the 3 or 4 of us and say, hey, I think this is a controlled environment. We might be liable for CPP and EI. And at that point in time, please reach out to us and let us know how we can help. Yeah, with that, I think that's good on my end in terms of anything. Again, our website is atlasrms.com. Again, reach out to Dyson and let us know how we can help make sure that you're safe, your direct tip model, and ultimately to make you know, tip distribution easier. And we wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about how much time I spent in an office with piles of money and envelopes and a monster spreadsheet, you know, whittling away hours of my life to calculating tips. So there's a real time saving element to this for sure. But most importantly, let's keep each other safe. And let's make sure that we're all aware of, you know, the environment we're in. And yeah, please reach out to us whenever you'd like and let us know how we can help.
I'd like to thank everybody for showing up, and I hope to see you guys in the Food and Wine Career Navigator. I do hope that you check out Atlas, and that you can share this video with other people that you think may get something out of this.
Yeah.
Lovely. And just a final note for everyone, this is not legal advice, but we are super happy to put you in touch with our legal expert, James Rhodes, who will be able to provide you with answers to like any of your legal questions that you may have. And to echo what Turi said, for anything else, you are more than welcome to contact us at hello@atlasrms.com. And also just one final note, any referrals that come through Food and Wine Industry Navigator do receive a 15% discount on our products.
There you go. Excellent. All right. Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much. Have a great Tuesday afternoon. If you're working tonight, have a great service, and we hope to hear from you soon. Cheers.